Imagine getting a phone call, "Hi, this is the FBI. We believe we found your client data on the dark web." It is the FBI, you verified it, and they show you this link, and you're reading file name by file name, spreadsheet, Word document, and your first reaction is, "I can open them. They clearly are the client's files." And then you go to the client's back-end systems, actual same names. But here's the difference. The files that we're looking internally have a lock button next to them because they're encrypted. Because there's forensics around it, we further went down the list. It was called a right-click option to a third. They decrypted it and sent it to a third party. So we narrowed down all the documents that went to this one particular third party. It was the third party's network that got breached that was supposed to keep that data protected. We shifted the burden of responsibility because we had the evidence to show. Otherwise, without this solution in place, it would have been, we have to file, we're medical, certain 500 records, go on the wall of shame. They'd have to do that, right? So it's really interesting.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Barry McKinley Vision Podcast. Today we've got James Oliverio with us. And James, you and I have known each other forever. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
talking like 2007 type of
Yeah.
range. And I'm so glad you're here. Why don't you share with everyone how you found yourself in this crazy IT world and your journey through it?
Well, Josh, thanks for inviting me to the podcast. Well, look, I started on Wall Street with a guy with a PC cart, and it became, the PC jockey for an investment bank. I grew up in that bank, and they promoted me into the CIO role. The bank got purchased. I got an opportunity to go with a bunch of bankers to another investment bank, and they said, "Go start a business." What do I need to know about starting a business? Well, those bankers went out and started their investment firms. I started my IT company, which then evolved into a managed services company, which I ran for a bunch of years, and I sold it in 2015. So
Got it.
we crossed over when, the Kaseya days and how do you optimize and get the most out of your platform and efficiencies, but, learned a lot.
Yeah.
But today I've decided to go onto the security lane as a result of a program I took at Harvard University about 6 or 7 years ago.
That's very cool. And James, I had the opportunity to come and visit you guys a bunch of years ago. And were you on like the old IBM campus or something like that?
We were on a campus, which is actually today it's called the Regeneron, which is all the therapeutics, and Regeneron, the juggernaut of a healthcare, company. Yeah, we were in the subterranean, below grade data center. Underground was an old Lockheed Martin facility.
Lockheed Martin. Okay.
Yeah, and that was another 9 days, right? My company name was Another 9.
Yes.
99% uptime's great, but that's 87 hours of downtime.
Mhm. Yeah.
So 99.999, less than 5 minutes of downtime a year, so yeah. So
You know,
we were doing the traditional MSP thing back then.
I remember often you were I didn't come from an IT background, so I had never heard like the 5 nines thing or anything like that. And I remember just asking you, and what your name meant, and you almost seemed kind of disappointed in me, like, oh, I have to explain what the 5 nines is to you, and you were so kind about it, but I was like, man, I think he's just really bummed out right now. But the other thing, and we can edit this out if this is like wrong or public information. One
Yeah,
of your clients, I tell the story at least once every couple years. You had a connection with the Snuggie, didn't you?
I did.
Can you share
All-Star
that a little bit?
absolutely, up in Westchester County, New York, as we're building in our business and practice, we're leading people back then in the early 2000 timeframe, before cloud was the cloud, leading them into our data center co-location. So, All-Star Marketing, the makers of the Snuggie, the Topsy-Turvy, and thousands of other products they brought to market, Howard Boylan had a personal relationship right up the road from us. We managed their infrastructure, so they would have all their certain systems, plugged into our data center, QVC, and all the their marketplace, and it's like dialing for dollars as they brought product to market, and they did, those phone calls, and we got 32 items, right?
Right.
All those systems were coming to our data centers. We had to make sure those things remained up and resilient.
Mm.
But I had them, I had the Wine Enthusiast, Wine Spectator, the publication. So I had a number of good brands up in Westchester County as
When
clients.
you when the Snuggie was, lots of MSPs have lots of really interesting clients. So I always, in my mind think, well, I wonder how intimate they are with that product or that service and whatnot. So I don't expect you to have been very intimate with it, but Were you aware when that thing went from just a, "Hey, is this a thing?" to, like, a massive thing? Like, was that a moment that you guys saw, or were you just too busy?
No, we were busy, but we saw their growth. Like, they didn't see that coming. It became like a culture thing, right? They were doing hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, which then they expanded and, they got into other products and services. If you think about what they do, if you have an idea and you wanna bring it to market and put a
Mhm.
patent around it, if it's good enough, they'll buy you out of it, right? So that's
Mhm.
what they do. Like, I brought them something to look at years ago, and we
Mhm.
walked. Well, I went through the process. Right, it was a thing
Yeah.
for in New York State. You can't, you can pump your own gas, but they took off the latch, right? So it was
Right.
like called the gasoline buddy, a mechanism that would stick in the handle, so you don't have to
Right.
stand out in the cold, holding the gas pump.
That's
So
funny.
so I walked through that process and the review and how they look at it, and like if you in the state of New Jersey, there's a guy who has to come out and pump your gas. It's
Right.
required, right? Other other things across the US. We ultimately decided not to go down the path because we
Sure.
walked through it. So I got to see hand in hand what it is to take a product to market.
Oh, that's cool. Well, and speaking of taking products to market, tell us what you're doing right now. Give us a little update on what you are working on and what you've been spending your time on.
Yeah, look, I was known, as you know, with 99% uptime. I'm the uptime guy,
Mhm.
right? So when I think about my career, systems I was building out for investment bankers, you had resiliency. You had to build them that they worked. They didn't become an impediment for them to put ideas on paper. The same holds true for any company. So I did that for a long time. I just got tired of, one service tick after another service tick, someone's printer not working, and the challenges that presented. I got a good opportunity to exit, and I did some studying on what my next chapter is going to be. And I was going into another MSP to kind of build out a larger national footprint, and then something piqued my interest where I saw an ad come across, "Managing Risks in the Information Age. Join us at Harvard, 4-month
Mhm.
program. You'll take apart all the major breaches, Sony, Target, Equifax, etc." I said, what the heck? Let me spend some money. So I went into this online system, online class where we did pull apart all those breaches, right? So I decided to resurrect the company around some of the concepts I learned out of that, because we learned three things through those studies. One was you can't be the CIO and the CISO, separation of duties.
Mhm.
That was a big component because when we looked at all the major breaches, they had the great tech stack. They ignored the alerts. They were fixing someone's printer, working on a project. We'll get to that alert, right?
Mhm.
Well, I think as a result of that program I participated several years ago, I think every major institution today adopts that philosophy. So if you
Mhm.
look up a major investment bank or whatever, I believe you'll see CISO reports into legal or compliance or into the board of directors. Might
Mhm.
have a dotted line, but they're not governing over security. They have to be involved with it, but they separate it.
Mhm.
2 was the amount of data that was stolen from those organizations that we studied, it was unstructured. So it
Mhm.
was Word documents, spreadsheets, sensitive data, right? And how do you make all sense of cyber in the C-suite? There was a concept called return on mitigation, ROM, okay?
Mhm.
Qualifying the financial return of reducing measurable exposure. So if you think about return on investment, this is just what does your risk profile look like, right? And through certain metrics. And when you think about data, I got involved in the data game and I got involved with a company that actually quantifies the actual data to a dollar amount to a single pane of glass and gives a client, I think, what we refer to as the invisible liability. It doesn't live off, it lives off their balance sheet. Why data risk is the most misplaced asset in on your balance sheet. That's what we do today.
So let me just so I make sure I understand that phrase, risk on return on
Return on mitigation.
mitigation. So if I said I've got a swimming pool in my backyard, and if I put a fence around it, I'm going to mitigate some risk. Somebody could look and say, "Hey, every time somebody gets injured or drowns in a pool, it costs this many dollars."
That's right.
Nevertheless, the tragedy of it. But they could say that fence will your mitigation return is X thousands, tens of thousands of dollars. Is that a
Correct.
fair way to look at it?
Fair way to look at it, right? Because
Okay.
the financial blind spot on a breach
Mhm.
is compliance, regulatory fines, operations, which is downtime. How does it impact if you had a ransom event? Market share, value to your stock, right? Valuation and
Mhm.
the PE exit. So when you look at Yahoo back in the day, they lost hundreds and hundreds of millions of valuation because of a breach, right? It's not a question, is the hacker the next vulnerability to you? That's really not the vulnerability. Have you really sat back and thought about, as an owner of a business, what data do we digest and create that creates our greatest vulnerability or risk? Don't
Mm.
wait for it. There's going to be an event at some point. Every company experiences it. Someone accidentally emails a document with all the compensation of the executive committee on a business. Oops. And then someone on the other side reads it and it gets onto the wire services. Look what they're paying all these people, right?
Mm.
Something as simple as that. It doesn't have to be dramatic where they've gone in and ransomed your ware, but most organizations, when they deal with a breach, financial, healthcare, or other, compliance is heavyweight, the operations, the market share, it takes a hit. We're all too, I think we live with it because that's the nature of the business, but we're trying to change the conversation. ideaBOX is trying to change the conversation, get
Mhm.
people lit up to the fact that what do you have you calculated your ROM? And when I go ROM,
Mhm.
I've heard of ROI. Well, ROM is really looking at your risk profile around the data that you digest. And that's what I've been involved with the last couple of years.
That's really interesting. So I was with a company the other day and just really cool company and but they're very just like heads down. They're in a big manufacturing type of space and every time I tried to kind of conversate around what they want to do around AI and automation and I would kind of gently bump up against the ROI conversation, that just wasn't interesting to them, right? They just wanted to know, what they could automate and what the AI could do for them, which was cool. But it was hard in that moment for me even to kind of nudge them into what would be a very beneficial conversation to them because they're about to go spend hundreds and millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of $1 million in this. But that was not interesting. How well are you finding the type of folks you work with? Are they taking to that ROM
Well,
conversation?
they are taking to it. Most C-level people lean forward and go, "Tell me more. What is this
Mm,
concept of this calculation you're talking about?" Because it's
mhm,
taking records that are inside files and putting valuations around it, like a
mhm,
date of birth record valued at $10, a credit card valued at 100. So the ROM conversation's resonating to a point, but where we really wanna deliver the message is that security to most organizations, well, they passed their last audit, we've complied with the right documents, and, are we safe is a question mark, right? Because
mhm,
security is still treated as a perimeter thing, right?
mhm,
Where if you can think of visualize a I would say an iceberg, right? Below the water is the perimeter stuff, the financial liability that lurks out there, which is the data, right? The hidden exposure, that's below, right? That's
mhm,
above. What's above is, yeah, we've got firewalls, we've got process, we've passed our audit, you know, and it's an interesting conversation, if the tale of two boards, right? There's a strategic boardroom shift when you start having a conversation on this, right? There's one boardroom that says, hmm, we passed our audit, uncertainty, right? So it's uncertainty around the actual data risk because they really haven't looked at the risk, right? So there's just checklists, right? They haven't really done an EBITDA against risk, right? And then the other strategic view is we've identified X amount of millions of risk. We've mitigated it by XYZ. We have an 80%, we have a greater visibility in mitigating. So that's a better conversation because actually stepped back and said, if we were to have a breach, what data is the greatest risk? And especially when you think about manufacturing, and here's another tidbit, right? Along my journey the last few years, because we track and identify all this unstructured data and
mhm,
we monitor its use. Well, where's this data traveling to? What websites? What large language models? Aha.
mhm,
And that was the breakout moment several months ago. As we have our tools out there running, Here's a subset of users that are taking and using ChatGPT, Grok, and other large language models. And especially with a manufacturing company that's supposed to keep certain safeguards around maybe patented data or documents, are your employees exposing you in that realm? And now it's opened up a conversation going, we never really thought about it. We want our employees to leverage and use AI for efficiencies, but we never thought about the liability that's suited with it, that goes with it.
So let me personalize this a little bit to my own situation so I can really understand well. So again, thinking about this manufacturing client, I spent a half a day with them. I got exposed to so much. It was really cool. And, they make all sorts of things and they make things for uh billion-dollar companies you've heard the name of,
Yeah, yeah.
and just like really cool stuff. And I wonder when you're thinking about this table of values for this document is worth this much and that document is worth that much. When I think of them, if I said, would somebody have a number say, oh, the design files for an interior piece on a Toyota Camry that's gonna be released in 5 years, they would be able to kinda say, "Well, yeah, that's probably worth, $100," or they would put
They
some
could put a va
valuation on
they
that.
could assign a value, or they could say, "Look, this is a record of sensitive nature." We could tag it, monitor its
Mhm,
use, and with our platform, you could actually encrypt it at a file level and protect it, which is the remediation piece, right? Which is part of the return on mitigation, right? So most organizations, we walk through this metric, and they join into our regular service with the data risk management platform that we install, is that you know, the case studies are plentiful, right? Imagine
mhm,
getting a phone call, "Hi, this is the FBI. We believe we found your client data on the dark web."
mm,
It is the FBI, you verified it, and they show you this link, and you're reading file name by file name, spreadsheet, Word document, and your first reaction is, "I can open them. They clearly are the client's files."
mhm,
And then you go to the client's back-end systems, actual same names. But here's the
mhm,
difference. The files that we're looking internally have a lock button next to them because they're encrypted.
mhm,
Because there's forensics around it, we further went down the list. Oh, it was called the right click option. It went to a third, they decrypted it and sent it to a third party. So we
mhm,
narrowed down all the documents that went to this one particular third party. It was the third party's network that got breached that was supposed to keep that data protected. We shifted the burden of responsibility because we had the evidence to show. Otherwise, without this solution in place, it would have been, we have to file, we're medical, we're above certain 500 records, go on the wall of shame. They'd have to do that, right? So it's really
right.
interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. So when and I'm no technologist, but I get exposed to
Yeah.
MSPs and, I'm always learning things. So I really kind of think of the conversations I hear from my clients with each other. And it's really about, endpoint security and firewalls and all the really good stuff. Um, this is that next layer deep to the actual file level. Is this uh data loss prevention, DLP? Is
Yeah,
that
it's
the
DL
phrase?
it's
Is that
if
what
it
this
fall
is?
it absolutely falls
Okay.
DSPM, data security posture management, data loss prevention. It
Okay.
does fall in there, but those tools work in a different manner. They block. They create a case. They give you an audit saying, "Hey, this is what's going on with this data." Not saying it's not valid,
Yeah.
but it doesn't remediate. We
Mhm.
remediate. We actually can put intelligence saying, "Hey, Josh just received a file that has 500,000 patient records on it.
Mhm.
That data is supposed to be protected 0 days. He can open it, he can work with it, but if anybody steals it from Josh's enclave or desktop or
Mhm.
server, they can't read it
Mhm.
because it's
Mhm.
automatically protected."
Yeah. Hell
So you
yeah.
can so the remediation piece is always in place. It's a different way of looking at it because every company has good security stacks in place. But I'll go
Mhm.
back to what I learned several years ago. The NSA, Sony, Target, Equifax, they had a great stack. They still got data stolen from them because the data wasn't protected at a file level. There you have it.
Yeah. And
This could
what
have reduced a lot of risk.
for sure. And what's your company name on this?
ideaBOX, and I
Okay.
partner with a company called Actifile. I wear their brand.
I gotcha.
Active, like actives,
Yeah.
Actifile.
Okay.
It's a key component of what we do to help. I work with MSPs as well to understand how to operationalize the conversation of ROM.
Mhm.
I'm sort of the ROM whisperer,
Yeah.
right? Which is to try to change the conversation about how do you approach cyber through a prism of saying every company has a different risk profile, and I believe it begins and doesn't end with the data that they digest, and
Mhm.
I really believe that's the case.
Well,
Financial services, healthcare, definitely because of compliance, manufacturing, and a small mom and pop, it doesn't matter. There's probably data or third-party agreements that they said they would keep certain data protected, that they're probably in violation at some point. You
sure.
can't protect something without knowing where it's at. That's what we look at. And
Yeah.
this is a solution that when you take it on, it opens up the conversation and says, I'm spending this money on tech, and I can correlate it's good money spent, but now it's even better because look what I'm protecting.
We'll be right back with more, but first, here's a quick message from Baring McKinley.
Most MSPs are constantly busy, chasing tickets, projects, and fires. But without structure, it's hard to know if the business is really improving. Vision from Baring McKinley is the system that helps you work on your business, not just in it. It connects leadership strategy with daily execution. Vision aligns people, process, and performance, creating clarity and rhythm from goals to results. And the Vision app brings that structure to life, helping you create policies, track goals, review KPIs, and collaborate with your BMK consultant all in one place. Behind it all, Jetson AI, your assistant inside Vision, helps you find answers, generate insights, and take action faster. With Vision, you gain visibility, accountability, and measurable growth. You're not guessing, you're improving. Vision, Jetson, and the Vision app, your path from strategy to results. Start transforming your business today.
All right, let's get back to the conversation.
Right?
Interesting. Do
I've been in boards with people saying, "What are we spending all this money on the tech? Budget time. Let's cut the IT budget." Whoa, time out. Let's turn cyber investments into a strategic conversation as opposed to, it's a line item, right? Very strategic.
so what often happens for me is I learn a new concept and just like kind of an 8-year-old, I think it was invented yesterday. Like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like is the concept of ROM and whatnot, is that a decade old now? Is that newer? Where
It's
in
new.
the life cycle are we there?
I think we're real new,
Yeah.
because it's the last 2 years I've been explaining to people, and most people lean forward. I've heard of ROI, right?
Mhm.
Quantifying the measurable exposure in actual dollars in terms of establish the baseline around your data, all right? How you mitigate certain controls around that data, right? Is it in an enclave, et cetera? How do you reduce the liability around how do you prioritize that, right? How do you
Mhm.
validate and calculate it? We use financial modeling from the FAIR Institute, fair.org, which is it's a non-profit, I believe, organization that goes out and looks at prior breaches, the controls of NIST, and all the different controls that we have out there. They we take the values that they look on, like, here's data that's sold on the dark web, and we plug those algorithms in that if Josh has got 250,000 date of birth entries, that's times $10 each entry. It's a value. It's really that simple. And then strategize around certain data, like how much of this data that you work on internally does you share with other parties that might be extending the risk of your organization? You'll find that a lot of that sensitive data really doesn't go outside. It's
Mhm.
internally, you know?
Right.
It's really interesting, But the data that does, then it's a whole nother strategy going, we never really thought about that's the type of data that's going out. We're taking on additional liability that we had no clue. We were
Mhm.
violating our third party agreements. We were I mean, it's the ROM conversation at the C-suite, right? With MSPs, it's a little bit of a different dialect to get them at the seat of business, right? Along the journey of this ROM calculation, you'll see where the data flows are, where these spreadsheets, Word documents come in and go out. Are they being shared with large language models? Now it's
Mhm.
another conversation, right? You say you want to optimize and adopt artificial intelligence responsibly, right? Well, here's your 5 users. Are they allowed to do this? They're taking patient-related data and throwing it up there playing doctor, right? I've seen this happen.
Mhm.
So I built case studies the last 18 months that I really poured my heart and soul into with Actifile as a call it evangelist and the lead guy in the US
Mhm.
to say, "Look, we can push the agenda here because we can build so many different classifiers that can look up and find the needle in the haystack, right?
Right.
Find the data that's out there specific to the client."
Well, it's pretty interesting, and, when I think of, concepts that are newer, even in my own business, as a management consultant and bringing concepts to owners, some percent of any concept are like, "Oh, hell yeah, tell me more, let's dig in," and then a large percentage are like, We're fine, I don't care about that." Right? So it's always this kind of journey of, can I compel you to care? Or can I find the right, vector to explain this to you in a way that you can care? Because I really think you should care. How are you finding people and their receptiveness to this conversation? Are you batting 1,000 for you say the word wrong, they say, "Hey, let's go," or do you get some
No,
people that wave it off?
there's been some I've learned like anybody that like any entrepreneur through failure, right? Failing most of the time. How do you get the message out there? Trying to reduce the friction, right, of the conversation. So from jumping with the tool first to now let's get away from the tool, we really are trying to fundamentally do our outreach by did you ever think about the invisible liability that lives off your balance sheet and get to the
Mhm,
C-suite? And it's and I'm doing articles on this topic, why data is the most mispriced asset, okay?
mm,
And that's what I'm getting some attention with because nobody really thought about it. What is this? It's getting to that one question, what data creates your greatest vulnerability? And if it
okay,
were stolen, taken, can you operationally survive that event?
mhm,
Okay? Because it's the downstream financial consequences that hit, right? Either if you're especially if you're in the healthcare, it's compliance. The regulatory funds kick in. If there's a breach on that data and stolen business interruption, maybe, you violate contract, you might lose market share. Your valuation plummets, right? If you're mid-sized to publicly traded company. So it's an EBITDA multiple.
mhm,
They're all look, they've got good structure, people with great background in security and operations, but I just personally think I've been doing this for 30 years. I've been a data guy. When I think about
mhm,
the early days in the markets for financial services, cybersecurity was really not a top of mind. What was in the markets was we've got a legal hold. Can you prove that this email is legitimate, no one modified it, or this document is it tamper proof? Because we're
yeah,
going into some case. So I had to build out algorithms with at the time we owned a company which is a publicly traded company today called Commvault. So I was early stages in the 90s. I spread almost 5 decades, 80s into the 90s, sitting with Commvault around email and attachments and data it's unstructured, right? That if we have to set this data aside, can anybody go in and change the figures and numbers, and can we audit that?
mm,
Immutable, right? So we're talking about worm technology back then. We're talking about at the date that's the last modified date, we proved, right? Because a lot of the cases are born around, well, you said our IPO would be priced at X dollars, and here's the valuation and all the documents you represented to us, and that's where the rub came in from, SEC perspective, right?
Uh-huh.
And then that's one element of it, and then who has access to it, right? You could put all the rights you have, but is there an audit trail on way f so it's data. When I think about the roots of it, and now fast forward this cyber thing and where I stumbled my journey, right, operations-wise, and I fell into this kind of arena. I'll just leave it with this kind of really, like, anecdotal, very funny story. My ROM story is out there on a social media presence for a couple of years, and this company, Actifile, reaches out and goes, "We love your story.
Mhm.
We can identify, quantify unstructured data through a single pane of glass and with a click of a mouse protect the data." I go, "Baloney, you can't do that." So, what do? I'm a skeptic like anybody else. "No, James, try it." So I take an agent, stick it on my
Mhm.
personal Mac, and look at the dashboard and watch it, like, rolling for, like, the debt service. It's roll up $27,000,000 of risk. My machine is 20. Oh, that's a false positive. I don't have $27,000,000 of risk.
Right.
I don't have data. Wait a minute. It's not my data, but I'm connected to it. It was
Mhm.
a Dropbox link. Really simple. And I went and I started clicking and navigated from the interface, then went to my machine. I went, "Oh my god, I'm still connected to this data." It was my attorneys. It was
Mm.
the deal room on all the merger and acquisition deals we looked at over 15 years. In
Yeah.
those deal rooms were health proxies on employees of those companies, bankruptcy information on companies and individuals, owners of those businesses, and the
Mm.
buy I mean, really sensitive data, Social Security data. So the light bulb went off. I went, "Oh my god, somebody built this?" So I
Mhm.
went all in and helped build out this elaborate interface with large language models, been using the tool, and I'm still gonna push the agenda of ROM. But that was
Yes.
that was like, "Oh my god," so because I had this vision of would be really cool if someone could really just, like, have something always out there and track it. And, the whole journey, could you imagine your number in a dashboard is always a number and it goes up 10 times that? I've seen this happen in
Mhm.
our platform. It's really simple. Forget about what the dollar amount is. Dollar amount translates to records that are sensitive in nature. So I
Mhm.
told the client, "Hey, you went up 10x. Go look at what came in," and they ingested, apparently through Outlook, patient records that are 5 and 600,000 rows of data with
Mm.
analytics. Really simple. The
Yeah.
business didn't understand that, but the C-suite now goes, "Oh my god, this is a liability. We had no clue." Now it becomes part of their board packet that they never go above a certain thing, and if there's data that comes their way from another third party, they can reject it. They delete it, get rid of it.
Okay, I have even more questions. I love that Dropbox story. So just so I can go full circle on it, because I'm kind of slow with
Sure.
this stuff sometimes. So you put the agent on, you see that, oh wow, there's this Dropbox thing I didn't even know was happening anymore. Now put that in a box for a moment, and those files somehow got breached, and somebody starts doing the trying to find out how. It leads back to James's little Mac in his office, years removed from it. Do you bear thus then some liability in that?
'Cause I
Somebody's
had
gonna
an
say it was
NDA I
you.
had an NDA that I would not disclose or give that data out, correct. I have liability. I'm decoupled from it, that was a couple of years ago,
Sure.
but yeah. But it's the classic you didn't know was there, and, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
again, I found other stuff too, right? That was
Sure.
buried on my machine that was my tax returns and all that, like, it became real personal for me,
Yeah.
but that anybody can digest. You do I wanna stay away from the tool for a minute.
Mhm.
Go back to the fundamental thing, right, about the it's the undetected liability, right, to that balance sheet for a company. Yeah, it's high level, but ROM is really about that. ROM is about that quantification piece, a metric that says, "I can quantify as a return on reducing the measurable impact of this data." But before you could do that, you have to know if you have it.
And what do you think on the insurance company side? They've got their actuaries and they're bright, smart, evil people. They're figuring all the things out.
That's a whole nother discussion.
On their list when people are putting in their cybersecurity surveys to get their policies and, annual and whatnot, do you think insurance companies wanna talk and see a ROM conversation? Do you think they want that to just live in their background, that they're just doing their silent kind of prediction? Where do you think it fits in all of their thoughts
Well, the
and
market's gonna pivot and change eventually because we think regulation's gonna come in and say, "Hey, this new tool way of approaching is a Netflix moment in the category of DLP," and make it a mandate. There will be other competitors in the space that could do the technology we do.
Sure.
So I'll leave it at this, right? Insurance carriers are gonna play their game because last year, I understand in 2024, 44% they paid off on claims.
Oh,
So that answers it right there. And how they didn't, because they went in and did forensically what we do with this tool.
right,
Well, you had checked on your policy 5,000 records that are sensitive in nature. We found 4,000,000. You're in
right.
violation. We're not paying off on the claim.
That's
That's
right.
how they get out from it. So when we showed them, if you have, give us in the region 200 policies, if you allow our agent to go out there, we'll rank each of those clients, do a return on mitigation around their data set, and see if
Mhm.
they even filed the proper paperwork. No, it's like opening up Pandora's box. They don't want that because they're hiding behind the again, it's gonna change at some point. So, I understand there's a lot of companies still chasing their policies because they thought they were covered. Boards
Mhm.
sit there, "Well, yeah, we passed our last audit. We've got our cyber risk policy in place. We got 25,000,000 of coverage." And they find out it's a towing cost,
Mhm.
and we wanna fix that. We wanna fix
Yeah.
that logic. We would love to become a rating agency for the
Wow.
underwriters.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
As part
Yes.
of, here's your policy, just like you like if you I like to use it for the healthcare stuff, but like for your life insurance of a certain age, they send what? They send somebody to your house, take your blood, take your vitals, go for a physical. Those numbers come in and you get a policy.
Right.
Why
You don't
can't
just
we?
tell them what it was. They come and check what it was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they check. So why can't we do this with, you know, I will tell you I was the first to do that several years ago, right? And I got
Mhm.
burnt by it. You know, where I licked my finger, did this because I checked a bunch of boxes called the Beasley questionnaire on a
Mhm.
cyber risk policy, because they did get back then how many records are sensitive,
Mhm.
healthcare. They got specific. A traditional underwriting policy now has 7, 8, 10 pages, right?
Wow.
With these kinds of questions, you got to check. How's your backups? You have a disaster recovery plan. You check all those boxes, right? But around the data, they want to know how many files, how many records, right? And then we're showing that on our platform going, I could go, "Here we go. We have 5,000,000 records. Just put it down because if you don't and you underquote it, then you're really not covered. You're doing your customer a disservice." It is what
Mhm.
it is. If you're in healthcare and you're manipulating a lot of healthcare data, it's not uncommon to see, and I've seen some of these systems, 15, 20,000 date of birth records in spreadsheets, prognosis, payout, from the carriers, right? Because their healthcare, they're running a business. Someone goes out of the medical organization's databases and they run spreadsheets and they run calculations. Why? Because probably looking for fraud, looking for, if this procedure for a knee replacement's 50K and the average across the US is 75, why are we under, right? They do that. They analyze
Mhm.
data. But
Right.
unfortunately, this person's 72 years old, the date of birth here, here's their social security number. All that stuff's in those records. And we've
Right.
helped a lot of healthcare companies go, "Oh my God," because it's a false sense of protection. "Oh, it's behind our firewall." So I go back to, well, NSA, the NSA, the Sony Target, Equifax, they all had great tech. The data was stolen. Don't be the next blip on
Right.
the radar. Get out
You
ahead of this. Do this now.
I think we should definitely close the loop here because just where my mind is,
Sure.
maybe our listeners' minds might be here as well. It's all right, cool. James has a dashboard to show me what my ROM is.
That's right.
I'm sure your tool does more than just say, "Here you
It
go,
does.
good luck." Right?
It does a
Well,
lot
if
more.
yeah, close as easily as you can. maybe finish the rest of the cycle there for us.
Yeah, I look, I would just encourage tool aside, right?
Yeah.
Just get if I could leave listeners with something, think about, you know, if you've never experienced a breach, and I have on behalf of clients, walk through
Mhm.
it. From the simple as someone clicked on something in a ransomware, right? Think of that day that how do you survive an event, right? So,
Mhm.
like disaster recovery plans are put together to do what? So you come out the other side through an event, right? Cyber events no different.
Mhm.
So I would say spend a little bit of time looking at the business itself with third
Right.
party agreements you may have signed. Pull out your cyber risk policy, start there, right?
Mhm.
And then talk to your business leaders, the accounting department, how they handle payroll, the flow, look at the flows of data. Because I think this one very fundamentally, right? Every organization has what? Employees. So let's make it really upfront and simple. If you
Mhm.
cannot protect your employees' social and their data, what makes you think you could protect your your customer vendors? So let's
Right.
start simple as that. And I've seen payroll files just get totally thing, and then personal identifiable stuff gets out, and then they have to issue for their employees here. Go to this Equifax thing monitoring. We apologize that we expose your social, right?
Mhm.
And these people have to their credit gets wrecked, right? So
Mhm.
start there. And that big question of, is there any data you think you might be digesting or creating that if it gets into the wrong hands, would that be out of business for you
Right.
or potentially out of business? Like so much pain. Think about that.
I don't wanna think about that, James. That, yeah, that's really sage and sound, kinda starting place. Just to put another kind of pin in this, when I think of, like, my own business, I think, "Man, I've shared documents with 1,000, 2,000 MSPs over the years. Where is all that stuff? What's sensitive? What's not sensitive?" When I think of an MSP, I mean, I've got P&Ls and, contact lists and maybe some other stuff that, it's high value, low value, who knows? But the MSP, how much data do they have of their
A lot.
clients,
A lot.
for unique one-off projects or, building tools for them. So I think the MSPs alone, not even thinking about deploying it to their clients,
For
that
themselves
exercise
to
you
say, "Are my
described.
engineers are following a certain protocol, not walking around with passwords in a clear text document
Mhm.
that they pull
Mhm.
out of IT glue or some other mechanism in their on." I mean, I ran that business.
Yeah,
I know engineers. I had some engineers, quite frankly, I would never disclose it, but some of them had photographic memories.
sure.
They didn't have to write anything down. I mean, I had 2 really interesting guys that worked for me in my career. It was fascinating. They
Mm,
could remember passwords from 2 or 3 years ago. They have
dang.
photographic memory. So,
Yeah,
that in itself, you will find at MSPs, if they just run this against themselves. It's
yeah.
it's like Steve Ballmer used to say, "Yeah, we eat our own dog food," right?
Mhm.
Back in the day when, Microsoft would come to town and back at DLJ days, the executive committees would get together, we'd have lunches, and they would use their own solutions, right? And I
Yeah,
always love that comment, "Eat your own dog food," and we
yeah,
do, right? And I
yeah,
believe this is even if you set certain things in place, data may come in and out, and a flag may go, "Oh, wow, that was sensitive. That was banking information, ACH. Wow, that's a problem. I didn't realize that I'm sending it in clear text." You could fix it.
yeah.
So,
Powerful stuff, James. Well, listen, where can people find you out in the world? Where can people learn more about this topic?
yeah, I mean, direct email James at ideaBOX, ideabox.com is one mechanism, easily, or my website, www.ideabox.com.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on, James. Everyone else, give us a like, a share, a subscribe if we earned it. Make some comments in the below. Tell us where you've experienced this. Tell us where James is off his rocker. This isn't as big a deal as he thinks it is. We love hearing those comments, reading those comments, responding to those comments. So thank you all. Bye.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh.